Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. And I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. One of the things that I'm particularly intrigued by, or actually fascinated, I guess would be a better word, since I've started this podcast, and we're coming up on 150 episodes now, is the frequency of contacts that I get from publicity firms, saying, here's somebody that you think that they think I would be interested in having on the show. And probably about 80% of those are kind of a no-go. But every now and then something comes across the transom that is kind of like, how have I not heard of this before? And that's what we're doing today, is having a conversation with somebody that when this came across my desk, I went, oh my God, this is a no-brainer. I've got to have Joshua on, and I've got to talk to him because there's a language that's being spoken here that my heart just opens up to. And my guest today is Joshua Berry. He's the managing director and co-founder of a company called Econic, which is a strategy consulting firm. I'm going to just be real simple with it. Strategy consulting firm. It's a certified B Corp, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But Joshua's got a new book that is coming out called Dare to be Naive. And this is one of the things that captured my attention. Dare to be naive, thinking bigger to create business success and joy. And the use of the word naive in that book title is kind of like, okay, I got to find out more about what this is about. So I spared no expense, which is easy to say because there was really no expense involved here, but I spared no expense in making sure I had him on the show. So Joshua, welcome.
I love it, Blaine. I hope I'm your best and cheapest date you've ever had. Right?
Yeah. Well, the purpose of business, from my perspective, is to uplift the experience of being alive on the planet. And if businesses are doing that well, they will never have to worry about making a profit because a profit's necessary. But I want to get the horse in front of the cart. And the horse is this notion of thriving. If what my service or product is doing is enabling thriving, that's the horse that's going to drive a lot of stuff. So with that as kind of a contextual frame here, I want to, well, first of all, I'm just going to start with a question. The soul of business, which is the title of the podcast here. When you hear the term, the soul of business, what does that evoke for you? What does that bring up?
Well, Blaine, thank you for having me on the podcast. This is going to be fun. The soul of business, the alma, right, of your business is truly the most authentic, innate, natural part of what this business is meant to be. It's a thing that sometimes gets smothered or covered up, right? I think everybody is trying to do business rather than letting business happen and really be channels for that soul of a business, which is really the people inside of it, to do what they're meant to do and bring into the world. And so I think when people are truly tapping into that soul, they're being able to be their most authentic versions of themselves. And they truly are trying to serve people in an extremely authentic, compassionate way, so that others can actually see that soul.
Now, that's a pretty naive position to take.
I did write a book about being naive, so I get a pass on that, I think.
You get a pass on that. Talk to me a little bit, and talk to the audience here a little bit about, what do you mean by naive? I mean, kind of, it's almost the same kind of an oxymoron as compassionate capitalism. It seems to be in people's minds. Yeah, business naivete. What are you talking about with this?
Yeah, I will definitely tell you, the publisher pushed back on it. They wanted it to be like, be more curious or be a change agent. And what I saw in my research and the successes that I've had in life is a lot of people who, when I talk to them, say, this might sound naive, but, and then share a really deep, maybe profound secret or business practice or story or idea. And I started to, as I was researching the book, dig into, why do we stop ourselves from, quote unquote, being naive? There's a lot of fears. There's a lot of story. Back to what I was saying before, there's a lot of things that get in the way of our soul fully coming out and sharing itself with the world. And so as I started to dig into it, what I mean by naive is being curious, but I also mean being authentic or innate. You see, Blaine, the word naive wasn't used in a negative sense with our ancestors. It's only been in the last few hundred years that being naive was a negative thing. It comes from a word that means native or innate, or that thing which was in you from the start, which pretty much sounds like the soul of business. And so the idea or invitation to dare to be naive is oftentimes daring to make space for that authentic voice to show up. And that's the book is really meant to help create that space for people.
Now, I love the epistemology of words has always fascinated me. I love kind of going on that journey. Where did it come from? The idea of naivete in that that's the native. I've never heard it. I mean, I never looked that word up, and this is a revelation to me. It's when I'm talking about compassion, it's predicated on connection.
Yeah,
and I will connect the dots here. The idea, I cannot be compassionate about or towards anything unless I feel connected to it. Otherwise, it's just an abstraction. Mm-hmm. But the behavior of compassionate, behaving compassionately, as if I've got your well-being in mind, requires me to tap into something authentic in me that allows the mirror neurons to actually be activated. I see in you what I see in me. I experience in you what I experience in me. And the idea of naivete and being naive, can you kind of close that circle a little bit? Where does that kind of authenticity come into? Because really, we're talking about tapping into authenticity and being willing to be naively authentic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. What I saw and how it connects back to being compassionate is when I started seeing those leaders and hearing their stories that I share in the book, they weren't talking about being naive in an ignorant sense, right?
Right.
In fact, what I discuss in the book is there's a chosen naivete that starts to come out. It's actually in one of Richard Rohr's books. There's a great quote in there that talks about journeying through past rational thinking into a chosen or second naivete. And it's, reminiscent of the joy and wonder of your youth, but like embedded in something more mature in terms of what's known or not known. And to your point about just connection that's there, I think when people truly stop and they listen into those things, they realize that they can act on those beliefs that do desire the better for another person, right? Or see best in others. I talk quite often to people about overly trusting, being overly generous, all of those things that seem naive, but actually are key to being able to kick off ripples of impact or a second type of ROI in life, which is very akin to, I believe, your compassion, capitalism idea.
Yeah, you mentioned Richard Rohr, and for those of you that are listening that are not familiar with Richard Rohr, do a quick search. You will be fascinated by this gentleman's writings. It is some really, really good stuff. The idea of choice. I love where this is going. It's naive. Dare to be naive is to understand the choice. And I'm taking this directly from some cliff notes here that I was provided. Sure. The dare to be naive is to understand the choice we each get to make as leaders and how we can use that choice to perpetuate good. And this, for what I know about the book and what I know about you a little bit here, is that doing good is good business.
100%.
So the idea of making it a choice. Joshua, let me kind of bounce this around with you here. For me, I'll put this in leadership context here. A business leadership is a spiritual discipline. And what I mean by that is I'm always confronting myself. If I'm really understanding what leadership is, I'm always confronting myself. And that self comes up in the decisions and the choices that I make in service of delivering the goods or services that my organization provides. Now, I can make those choices and decisions, with a short-term time frame or with a much longer-term time frame, which expands the stakeholder groupings that I'm actually, you talk about ripples of effect or ripples of impact, ROI. In the work that you do with your clients, and you've got a pretty stellar group of clients, with whom you've worked, and the Ritz-Carlton stands out particularly for me because I love staying at the Ritz. How do I feel about me when I'm in the presence of your service? I feel like a king. I mean, that kind of a thing. So, how do you work with your business leader clients to actually begin to have them appreciate that the naivete of doing good is good for business actually is a relevant business conversation to have?
Yeah. I will tell you, it's been easier the last couple of years as there's been a shortage of talent, if you will, or people for jobs,
Yep.
right? The people, smart leaders realize they need to be understanding how to serve and create, very attractive cultures for people to work in. And so sometimes we'll go the statistics route, right? There was a recent survey that showed that 75% of millennials would take a pay cut to work for a more socially responsible business, right? You have a large portion of the workforce who is voting quite literally with their pocketbooks and their paychecks of where they want to work. But the other things that we've seen is just, there are great examples of businesses out there who are choosing to do good, and then it turns out to be good for business. One of the stories I love to highlight, that's told better in my book, was a gentleman back in the 60s and 70s who eventually ended up building the largest outdoor gear and climbing company. And it came to a certain point where they realized that they were causing some extreme damage to the environment. And they had to make a decision to say, do we keep having a profitable business, or do we want to stop and pause and not harm the environment? And they ultimately chose to go by their values, or the soul of what they believed, and canceled that line of business and promoted a cleaner approach to climbing. Eventually that gentleman, Yvon Chouinard, renamed the company Patagonia.
Yes, Patagonia.
And there's so many other examples throughout their life, and a number of the other companies that I highlight in the business in the book, of where they said, we're going to go back to what we believe, and especially beliefs around the goodness in people and the worthiness or significance of people. And when we make those decisions, and for all of the stakeholders that are around that, and hold those up versus, as you said, the short game, it tends out working out quite often in life.
I want to keep on what Yves has done with Patagonia here. I mean, the company's in trust now, and there's a very interesting way that he's positioned Patagonia. And I apologize, I have not read the book. I didn't have time to get it from Amazon before we start the interview here. So how much detail do you actually go into in the book? Because I've used Patagonia as an example, kind of as an exemplar of compassionate capitalism a number of different times. But I'm hoping that when in the asking of this question, I'm hoping that there's a couple of nuggets there that I haven't discovered yet that I'm going, ooh, tell me more.
Hopefully there's more. There is one of the 16 chapters is devoted to the book, is devoted to those early days at Patagonia. But I set it up in a way, as well as all the other, it's full, the book is full of anecdotes and stories, but I use the stories and anecdotes not as a means to say, and this is how you should do business. The whole book is actually just about helping people be better critical thinkers and learn how to adapt. I honestly don't think the world needs another leadership book that says, here's the things you should adopt, and here's the 5 ways of doing this thing. So each of the chapters will get into something. Like there's a chapter on being more transparent with your financials to your employees. There's a chapter on allowing side hustles with your employees. There's one on prioritizing employee growth, even over short-term company growth. There's examples and stories in each of those, just like the Patagonia one. But each chapter ends with inviting the reader into what did you believe? You may have read that and you may have hated what I put in there. It may have stoked a great idea. What do you believe? Where did you learn that belief? Is it true? And what do you gain and what do you lose by holding that belief? And so it is truly, as we started this episode out, about creating space for people to listen to their authentic voices and understand what decisions they might want to make to be more intentional in their business.
I'm going to take a break right now. When we come back, I want to unbundle this last little concept about critical thinking and choice, because I think that there is a gold mine there. When we can really begin to explore it meaningfully. So, folks, we'll take a real quick break. Joshua Berry is my guest today. We're talking about being naive in a very positive sort of a way, in a manner that actually creates ripples of impact. We'll be right back. The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive. Welcome back. And before the break, Joshua had mentioned critical thinking. And I'm a grandparent. I've got 4 grandkids. And what that obviously also means is that I'm a parent, and I've been connected to the school systems educationally for some time now. And one of the things that I've noticed is, compared to when I was in school, and comparison's a great place to start. It's a horrible place to end up, but I'm going to start there. We'll see where we end up. Critical thinking was really encouraged when I was going to school. I mean, it was part and parcel of just the curriculum that I actually was presented with, both in primary and secondary schools, but also at university. Not so much today. I don't see critical thinking being something that's held up for people to examine themselves and their world view, as much as here it is, just accept it as it is, and then kind of go out and run with it. In the work that you're doing with this notion of being naive and connecting back to authentic self, and I'm here looking specifically at return on impact. Most people are familiar with return on investment, but this kind of naivete is a form of an investment in a different way of thinking and being. And one of the things that you said right before we took the break was focusing on employee development at the short-term cost of the organization realizing some of its goals and objectives. So I'd be very interested in having you kind of unbundle that, because I tend to agree with you vociferously here, but there are people that are their brains are going, what? kind of exploding here. Why would I want to do that if I'm a business leader and I've got quarterly objectives and I've got a bank note coming due and margins?
Absolutely. So the first place that I'll start with it is a spectrum, right? It's never binary, right? Do one thing or the other. Hence, we're trying to invite people into critical thinking. But maybe to answer it, I'll tell you, again, one of the stories that I highlighted in the book was about a division manager in a mid-sized engineering firm We were doing some team development and leadership development work with their company. And a few weeks after one of those sessions, this manager called me up and said, "Hey, I need a favor from you. One of our top performers, been with us for 20 years, is at a plateau, needs some additional development. Do you have any ideas? I'd love to find a mentor for him." As we talked a little bit further, I said, "The only person I can think of that would be a good match is actually a guy I know who works for your competitor." How would you feel about me introducing him to them? And this gentleman, Michael, paused for a bit, and he said, "I already know he's being recruited by that company too." He paused again, and after a bit, he said, "You know what? I think that's okay. Let's go ahead and make that introduction." And several months later, when I started writing this book, I reached back out to Michael and I asked him about that. And I said, "Why? Why did you do that?" And you heard the soul of a great manager there. He said, "I had a leader who was actually his senior by 15 years. I had a leader or a top performing contributor here who needed to grow. And I had a couple of options, right? I could connect him with this other person, and maybe he actually gets recruited even more and leaves. But at least he'd know that I cared about his growth and development. And at the end of the day, maybe it is actually what was best for him. Or he goes and he learns and he comes back to us. He realizes how great he has it here. And we're actually better for it because he's been able to learn something." But either way, he said, I wasn't doing it blindly or ignorantly about the risks that were in this. I was prioritizing his growth and development over mine, because anytime that I was holding my goals for my department or my division tighter than the goals of my people, well, then I'm probably going to do things that aren't always in their best interest, right? And, the Paul Harvey version of this story, he has one of the best divisions. It's most profitable, best employee engagement, et cetera. And so by playing that longer game and truly prioritizing, for instance, that individual's development over others, it sounds naive or crazy, but it ends up playing out.
Raj Sisodia, friend of both you and I, wrote the book, co-wrote Compassion or Conscious Capitalism with John Mackey. Before Raj wrote Conscious Capitalism, he wrote another book, and regular listeners of the show have heard me say this. The book was called Firms of Endearment, and it's the best book title I've ever heard. I love the title, Firms of Endearment. But he talks about that, the ROI, literally the ROI on this sort, where love, caring, nurture is an embedded piece of the culture of the organization. Firms that do this well, employee engagement scores are off the chart. I had the CEO of WD-40 on not too long ago, Tom Ridge, and Tom talks about their employee engagement scores. They're 92, 94, 93, 97, 96%. I mean, year after year after year after year, people come first. And it's not just something that they say, they embed it in the culture of what they're doing. So all of this is prefaced to a question for you here around business practices. In the book, or just anecdotally here, it doesn't have to be in the book, but what are some business practices, some new business practices that might be useful for people to begin to implement in their organizations, regardless of the size and scale of the company? What would be something that would be akin to kind of low-hanging fruit that would have a low barrier to entry?
Yeah.
Or barrier to execution.
Yeah, great questions. Some of them come to mind, and increasing financial transparency is one. It may sound scary, and I'm probably starting in one of the scarier spots, but people need information to be able to make decisions. And as you and I know, the best decision-making happens often when people who are closest to the decision that needs to be made. And so by being able to create more transparency, or again, to the framework I shared before, questioning what your beliefs are that hold you back from it, and what you would gain or you would lose from increased financial transparency would be important. That's definitely one area to look at. I think another area is the low-hanging fruit of experimentation. Quite often our company is getting pulled in, and this is what you referenced before for companies, projects at Procter & Gamble or John Deere or US Bank or others. We have teams who are teaching innovation and experimentation to the product and innovation teams. And what we're more or less doing is helping them see that you can't predict the path from A to Z for most of the unknown things you're working on. And so the best thing you can do is realize what are your riskiest assumptions, prioritize those, and then set about with intentional learning to experiment or work against those things. And so I think those are definitely low-hanging fruit. And then maybe the easiest one of all that just popped to mind was, as a leader, being able to admit, I don't know, and at least questioning yourself on vulnerability, right? By getting to a certain point. I always like, and you mentioned you're in leadership development, Blaine, that idea of a pyramid, that, you know, what got you here won't get you there. And there's a certain point where it was your prowess and your competency that got you the next promotions. But at some point, what you know actually should be less and less. And you have to go back down that pyramid and be the anti-knower, if you will, or the anti-hero quite often to be able to do that. So again, start with saying, I don't know, and being open to the collaboration that comes from that.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about how we define leadership in the work that we do, it's about influencing others in order to co-create coordinated movement, that co-creation, the ownership transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah. We connect through vulnerability, we disconnect through certainty. And if a leader is actually being certain about everything, there's no place for people to engage.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, I think it's a very fair assessment. And we got to go back to what you had said before about, if in education or your first jobs today, we're reinforcing that you have to be certain or right, that makes it harder. And so leaders, or people especially who are responsible for culture, have to realize that you're fighting against the societal system. We call it the addiction to being right. And so some of our work is just work with leadership teams as we help set up new governance structures for innovation with companies. And one of the first things we work on with executives is, how do we end your addiction to being right? But it has to come from good modeling and creating safe spaces for people to be okay with saying I'm wrong.
Yeah, that addiction to being right, I think it is a universal human affliction. And
me too.
Me too, absolutely. Most people, in my experience, would rather be right than get what they say they want, and they will take that to the grave. Yeah. But I was right. Didn't get what I wanted. I was right.
Yeah. Hence the framework again that I mentioned before. Where did you learn that thing? Is it really true? What do you gain and what do you lose from that? And if you can at least start to own that everybody loses something from some firmly held belief that they had, you start to crack the door open to the possibility that you have some learning to do.
Beautiful. And that's what, moving possibility into probability so that it can become a reality. That's the migrational path. So, Joshua, thank you. I mean, I'm hating to say thank you here because it's indicative that we're running
serious. We're done. Wow.
Yeah. I would love to have you back on. And there's a couple of other shows that I'd like to bring you on as well. One of my partners, David Meltzer, he and I do an office hours series every week. And love to have you on that. And we've also got a couple of TV shows in the works right now. One of them is called The Soul of Business. It's a long form. We've got it up on Apple TV, or it's going to be up on Apple TV. Love to have you on that as well. So I'm going to be circling back with your team here very shortly, and we'll see what we can do to make all of that happen.
Honestly, what just came to mind is the Khalil Gibran quote: "Work is love made visible." And my definition of love is the active concern for the growth and development of another. And I appreciate that expression, Blaine, in terms of your gift of that. I think, we can continue to do it. And it's obvious you're doing some amazing work right now that is blessing a lot of people right now. So thank you for that.
Echo that with the work you're doing. I mean, again, folks, when this came across my desk, it's kind of like, I can't not have him on the show. There's too much here that we need to explore and unbundle. So, Joshua, thank you so much for taking the time. I've greatly appreciated the conversation. And where can folks find out more about what you're up to? Where can they get the book outside of the regular places? But again, the book title is something that you're going to want to pick up.
Sure.
You're going to want to grab this. It's Dare to be Naive, thinking bigger to create business success and joy. So where can they find out more information about you and the firm and that sort of thing?
The best place to see it would be the book website, which is dareToBeNaive.com. And then I'm most active on LinkedIn. And so you can find me there under Joshua Berry on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you, my friend.
Blaine, this was great. This went way too fast. I look forward to talking again soon.
Absolutely. We will make that happen. You've been listening to Joshua Berry, and I am Blaine Bartlett. You are listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. Folks, check out our website. There's a lot of material up there that is available for free. Probably about 80% of what I've got there is downloadable and useful, or at least usable. You're the one that determines whether it's useful or not. We'll see what happens here. And in the meantime, go out and be a center of distribution in your life. Don't be a center of accumulation. Focus on giving stuff away. Yeah, just make it work. Make it work. The world needs it. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode.